Hey guys, today we're going to talk about the controversial topic of pay-to-play games and hiring a GM. Let's check it out. Hey guys, welcome back to the GM's table. And as I said, today we're going to be talking about kind of a controversial topic. We're going to be covering pay-to-play games and GMs for hire. Now, I know this is a controversial topic right from the start. Some people feel very strongly about it. So I want to say, while I totally appreciate you guys commenting below on how you feel, let's keep it civil, let's keep it clean, and let's try and all stay friendly because this is a community, and even if we don't agree on things, we're all part of the same hobby. Number one. This one, I don't see a ton, but I do want to address it. And this argument of it goes against the spirit of the game. Let's be real honest here. This was never a game that was free. Tabletop gaming, and at this point I'm going to be talking a lot about Dungeons and Dragons because it's the progenitor to basically everything else, was always a business. Okay? It started as a rules hack to a pre-existing war game that turned into a book for sale, that turned into a magazine, again, for sale, that turned into an entire publishing company that was looking to turn a profit. And I think the biggest one that turned into, as soon as they saw the opportunity, merchandising and selling the name of Dungeons and Dragons to make toys and a Saturday morning cartoon. I, for 1 second, don't believe that if Gary Gygax, in the heyday, was given opportunities to be paid to run games, he wouldn't gladly take the money and in turn give the best game he could. But it was always for profit. This has always been a business. This is publishing. I do fully appreciate that in OSR games and in the OSR community, there are a lot of free games out there and a lot of people who do it for the love of it. But there's also people who do it as a career. And if you don't like that people are doing it as a career, we wouldn't have this hobby. Number two, this one baffles me possibly more than any of the others. And it's basically the argument of, well, if you're paid to do it, it's just going to become a job, which means you're going to be worse at it, or it's going to be lower quality. This is said a million different ways, a million different times, but it's basically summed up to once you're paid for it, it's a job, therefore it won't be as good. Guys, that's not how professionals work. If you personally think because you see it as a job, you'll put less quality into it, that's more an expression of work ethic. Okay? This is the same as cooking, as art, as writing. All of these people are doing things that really anyone can do for free. But they're paid to do it because people want specifically how they do it. And they become professionals at it. By being paid to do something, you then open up more time to dedicate to the craft of it. You can actually take it even more seriously. You can devote more time. You have more resources. And that just creates a better product. Number three, this one I found interesting, but a good bit of people either say that's what con games are for, or I would pay for a con game, but not for a GM. This one, at first, I totally understood till I talked to more people, and then it baffled me even more. Because here's the thing. In my experience with con games, I love them. They're typically very high quality games. The GM is very, very prepared. It's usually an adventure they've run a bunch, which means they're able to adapt it, and they can deal with players' weird ideas because they're comfortable enough with the material that they can just kind of do whatever. They typically have physical handouts and more prompts. If you're dealing with minis, this is where you tend to see the really nice terrain and set pieces and all the really cool showmanship that can come with GMing. Yes, there's the downside that it's typically a one-shot. You're going to be playing with people you don't know because you're at a con. But as far as from the GMing side of it, in my experience, it's typically top-notch. So then I started asking people, because I was doing some research for things, of, okay, so I do get why you'd want to pay for a con game. That's a top quality experience. But why do you have problems with someone who wants to and is willing to essentially pay for that level of quality every session? Because we're going to get into expectations and stuff, and I do believe if you're paying for it, you should be getting better quality. That's not up for debate. But this whole situation of, well, yeah, I'm totally fine paying for that really great quality at this location, but nowhere else when it's the same product. And the part that baffled me is some people came back to me and went, well, no, I actually think con games are worse. You're dealing with other people. I've had some really bad GMs at con games. They actually think home games are better than con games. Okay, that's preference, but there are also people who'd say they'd happily pay for a con game, which leaves me scratching my head even more, because then you're essentially saying you think this type of game is worse, but you'll pay for it and not what you think is better. That baffles me. That at that point, to me, that's stubbornness. That I don't want to pay for it out of what I think is principle rather than looking at it logically. But also, if you're paying for a game, and again, this is theoretical in this headspace, if you're paying for a game with a set group in an ongoing campaign, aren't you getting the best of a home game and the best of a con game? And I asked this, and no one really ever had a response to it other than just, well, then I wouldn't pay for it. And I think that's kind of just being stubborn for the sake of being stubborn, right? Number 4. Look, I get this is already a controversial topic. I'm not meaning for this to come off antagonistic. I'm wanting to discuss and kind of give counterpoints. But this one's going to have to give some hard truths to people. Because number 4 is, it's said in many different ways, but essentially, I've been GMing for 30 years and I did it for free, so why should anyone ever get paid? Their games will never be as good as mine. I have literally seen that one verbatim. And this was best put to me in a way, but I want to cover it on 2 fronts. So the first front, this was really, really best put to me as someone who gave a great example of, they are personally a teacher, but they said, I teach. And I have met teachers who've been teaching for 30 years and are still awful at it. The students hate the classes. People go and do take these classes because they have no other choice. They have to. But the teacher's been teaching for 30 years. They think they know exactly how to teach, and they're not getting the results they could be. In turn, I've seen people who've only been teaching for 2 years, and they're just natural teachers. They're really great at it. They engage the students, which means students perform better, grades are better, the overall results are better. So teaching for 30 years doesn't automatically make you a good teacher. Someone who's taught for 2 years can be a much, much better teacher. I think this example is amazing because it's funny, I never stepped back and looked at it this way, but it's identical to GMing. A GM in so many ways is the same roles as a teacher. And I think it's the exact same setup. You can have GM'd for decades, and someone who's only GM'd for a couple years might be a better GM than you. This isn't knocking anyone specifically, and this isn't saying those who have GM'd for 30 years aren't good, but this is a hard truth you may need to acknowledge. Just because you've been doing it a long time doesn't mean you're great at it. Additionally, this is even more nuanced than teaching, because just because you've been doing it a long time doesn't mean the style in which you do it, which you might be great at that style, is what someone wants to pay for or what people are looking for in a particular moment. Now, the second part of this I want to cover, and this one, again, I don't want to come off antagonistic, but a cold hard fact, because I've interviewed several people who are professional GMs. Very, very few of them just wake up one day and go, hey, I'm going to start charging to be a GM. Or, hey, I'm going to make business out of this because. Now, several of them have, and they are very good at it. And some GMs do wake up one day and decide, you know what, I'm a GM, people are making money, I'm just going to make money. And when you start doing the research, you can spot them. They stick out like a sore thumb because they're very obviously only doing it for the money. They're very obviously someone who didn't already have people wanting for it, so they're trying even harder. But the ones that are successful typically were already in demand GMs. They were already people who had way more players wanting to play in their games than they had time or seats available. And more often than not, these are GMs, at least in the people I've interviewed and the people I talked to, who weren't charging until someone wanted their game badly enough that they essentially went, look, I know you don't have extra time for this. Look, we're all adults. You have a job, you have to carve out an extra few hours a week, a month, whatever. It is difficult. I will pay you. And typically, it's not just I'll pay you. I've actually come across many jams where players are like, yo, I'll pay you, and then nothing comes of it. But when a player literally goes, I will pay you this much money, and if what they offered is worth the GM being able to make extra time, that is when they go, well, yeah, I can actually do it if you pay me that. Because they didn't have another way to make the extra money. And from that, they're then being paid to GM, which already means they're a professional GM. But then word gets out, and that's where it can snowball into full-time GMs, which are very, very rare. Typically, it's a GM making just enough to supplement the time and energy they need to make extra games. Also, most of those paid GMs are still doing free games. What you're paying for is them to have the time to do the game you wanted, rather than the game that they already had, that they very much care about, that is already free, but it's eating up all the time they had to run games. So to run more games, they had to be paid. That's how many GMs become paid GMs, because other people already offered them money. If no one has come to you and said, hey, I want your game so badly, I'm going to pay you, then odds are if you were to become a professional GM, no one's going to be knocking at your door, waving money around. The demand typically has to be there beforehand because, again, I'm also going to acknowledge this is a product a lot of people are giving away for free. If you're someone who's paid for it, there's a reason you're paid for it. This isn't just any guy on the street corner. You can spot those, and those don't succeed. The people who are successful at this are because they're providing something people are willingly paying for. And this isn't well, then I'll just run a game for them for free. They didn't want your game. They wanted this person's game. That's why they contacted this person. That's why they are paying this person. Yes, sometimes this is celebrities. This is Matt Mercer and all of that stuff. Fine. But even the ones who you may not know or know of their reputation doesn't mean they don't have one. Number 5. This one I actually see a connection to more than anything, but I still want to talk about it. And this is probably the most common one I've seen of, but if I pay the GM, it's going to change the dynamic. Now, this is going to kind of be piggybacked on but if I'm paying the GM, he's going to go easy on us, and he's not going to let us die or let us fail because he's going to want the game to keep going. Yeah, I lump them together because I think it's very important. People are thinking the dynamic's going to change, and that's what the change of the dynamic will be. Okay. This is partially 100% correct and unavoidable. As soon as you are paying a GM, the dynamic will change. No argument about that. But what changes in the dynamic, I think gets overlooked. On top of interviewing a bunch of people who have become pay to play GMs, I also interviewed a bunch of people who happily pay for games. And the single most common reason people are willing to pay for games is because they believe, and we're going to talk a little bit about the facts behind this, but they believe that if you are paying to be in a game, and if everyone at the table is paying to be there, they're going to have less flaky players. People are going to show up on time. People are going to know their characters better. Overall, people are going to be more dedicated and more passionate about this game because they're paying to be there. And that is true. I've had a couple people who want to argue were like, well, if I pay for something, I'm less likely to show up. First of all, that's weird. That means you waste money. I'm not even going to touch into that. But from a psychological standpoint, yes, the second you have paid money for something, psychologically, you are more tied to it. Your brain is more committed to seeing it through because you have already committed a financial sum. This is just true. This is how they hook people in with pay a little bit to get started and then jack up the price later. Not just things that are addictive. This is how subscriptions work. This is how all that kind of stuff tends to work in marketing. You start low to get them in, but once they've already invested some money, it's a lot easier to get more money out of them. The same concept works of once you've invested some money into a game, you are far more likely to be more involved in that game, to be more dedicated to that game. It's just a fact of how our brains work and how business works. So yes, some of the dynamics will change. But this idea that if I pay my GM, he's going to make the game and try and stretch the game out, or go easy on us and go, oh, no, I'm fudging rules so you don't die, so you keep coming back. Okay, there are some GMs that do that. That's inevitable. The ones who do it, the ones who artificially stretch the game to keep you playing, are seen as frauds. Those aren't, I'm not going to say those aren't the successful GMs. There's one very successful professional GM that's very, very guilty of that, and it's become very well known. I wish I could know exactly how much that's hurt his business, but let's just say talking to other professional GMs, none of them are very happy that someone is doing that. None of them are very happy that a GM in general would do that. That's not a typical practice within this kind of corner of RPGs. That's essentially being seen as a con man because that's what you're doing. Now, the other big thing to look at with this is you are paying the GM for a service. Any good GM and any good business person will want to give you the service you want. Because if they give you what you don't want, you're more likely to leave. If you want a game that is tough as nails and that death can be around any corner, find a GM that's selling that game. Because there are them. There are those out there. They're out there a dime a dozen. There's also the GMs who offer custom experiences. Tell them that's what you want, and they will deliver it. Why? Because that's what you're paying for. If that's what you ask for and they don't deliver it, they're bad at their job and they deserve to fail. But that has nothing to do with the overall art of GMing or the business practices as a whole. GMs who, for one reason or another, because there are a multitude of reasons, are at a point where they're taking money for GMing, feel very strongly about this in the interviews I've done. That if you ask for a game, they do their best to deliver that game. If you don't like the game, then stop going, and their business fails. And now they don't get customers. They're no longer a professional GM. That's how the market works. That's how weeding it out. Now, that's not to say GMs don't offer games where it's all about the story and characters don't die because you're heroes and that's how it goes. Again, you can find those games if that's what you want. There's also middle grounds if that's what you want. And it's about conversation with the GM. I think this side thing of what if we do this and then the GM's going to act this way happens. I actually find that side of it kind of funny because free GMs do that too. That's a GMing style. That's not a paid for style. Money doesn't create that style. Now, if a GM's already bad about it, yeah, money can make that worse. But again, that's finding the right GM, just like with any game. I've known plenty of GMs. I had this huge, when I first started this channel, and I did a video about dice fudging is the GM cheating. A ton of GMs who go, well, I just do it and the players don't know, and da-da-da-da-da. They're not being paid to do it. They think they're better than that. They think they have the right to do it. That's a GM problem, not a payment problem. Okay, finally, I said after my 5 reasons, I was going to kind of talk about a personal instance with this. If you haven't guessed, and hopefully you don't immediately close the video, I'm now paid to GM. It's not all my games. But before I even decide to say yes, I wanted to do some digging, wanted to look into how other paid GMs got there, wanted to see if mine was some kind of fluke, wanted to get into that, see if it's a viable thing, look at what the expectations are. I wanted to go and look to see about if this is how common of a thing this is. I wanted to see how other people react to it. And I wasn't just straight up posting out, but I was researching in threads, I was talking to people. And yes, I am, as of this month, going to be paid to run a game. But I want to be honest and open about this. Because if some people go, well, if you've accepted money to GM, I don't want anything to do with you, fine. Unsubscribe. I hope you don't. I really hope you didn't click it as soon as I said fine, unsubscribe. I hope you don't, but I want to be very honest and upfront about it because basically what had happened was I have a player where their schedule changed and their life changed. And it's someone who I had already known and who had been in several of my games and very much likes my games. And first they messaged and went, are you open to being a paid for GM? And I was like, I don't know. I want to look at this and all that. And then they went, well, I'm not going to say exact numbers. I don't like talking about that kind of stuff openly. But let's just say they went, well, I can pay you this much to run twice a month. And I went, well, you know what? That much, I'm going to be real honest here. That much is enough where I can show my wife and go, hey, do you know, if she goes, why are you running another game? This is supposed to be the time you spend with us. Like, we don't have a ton of it, and you're already cutting another 4 hours out of it every other week. I can go, yeah, because I'm making this much money. And then she can go, okay, yeah, I get that. I even discussed it with her before I officially agreed. But it was like, yeah, that is a cost versus time we're okay with. And we can understand that because that can help with some bills, that can help pay for vacations and things like that. So I came back to him and I went, yeah, that's cool, but I don't have an idea for a game. And this is where it went into the back and forth of essentially, well, this is the kind of game I'm thinking of. And at first I started with, before it really clicked for me, of, okay, I'm going to try and get everything out of you to run the game. And eventually it went, look, this is the kind of game I'm kind of wanting, but the fact is that I'm hiring you. I want your game. And that's where it clicked, especially after I've been doing the research of, that's right. He even straight up said, he went, I trust you. If I didn't trust you, I wouldn't have offered this. What? That's kind of the point, isn't it? Where you pay a GM you already trust for one reason or another. Maybe it's someone who's out in the community enough that you know they give good product. Maybe it's someone you've seen their games enough. Maybe it's someone you've played in their games enough. So yes, I am now a paid for GM by someone I already knew. And I didn't come to them going, hey, I need to make a few extra bucks. I'm going to run a game for you for some money. No, they went, I know you don't have the time for this for free. You're using all your free time to do things like this, to do things like the games I run that I'm currently turning into podcasts and all kinds of stuff. To be honest, this is getting very busy. But I care enough about being in your game. I'll pay this money. I'll find the players. I just want to be in one of your games still. From there, it snowballed, and I've talked with other GMs, and I'm going to be really honest, this isn't getting out huge. You may have even seen a few posts in different places where I'm starting another game, a Savage Worlds game, where you can buy seats. And I didn't plan on doing this in this video, I'm going to be real honest, there's going to be a separate announcement video. But I've collected with other paid for GMs to make an actual company. To make something where it's not just one dude offering his services, but a company that will have standards, that will have business practices, that will have very strict rules, not just for if players get out of line, you can be banned from not just my games, but all the people's games in the collective and stuff. But rules for the GMs, that if we find out you're doing stuff like extending campaigns to make more money, you're out. We won't put up with it. Stuff like that. And again, there's going to be an official announcement video for that, as well as an announcement on here about a couple of the games I'm doing with it just to try it out. But I'm saving that for later. The big thing is if you guys haven't noticed when I do this kind of stuff, I never go halfway into it. If I'm going to take the step into it, I'm going to go fully into it. But not just that, I want to push and evolve how it's seen and how it's done. So do expect more news on that if you're still around. Thank you for sticking around if you're still around. Thank you for not unsubscribing when you found out the news, because this was a decision I made after a lot of research. and a lot of work and a lot of looking at, am I okay with this? Starting with honestly helping who I'd consider a friend get a game they really wanted, but pushing into an opportunity for me and several other personalities on YouTube, personalities in the blogging sphere, personalities in the publishing sphere of gaming, all together into something to try and make something even better and something more professional and something that feels like a safer investment for you guys too. Anyways, with that, don't forget to like, subscribe, do all that great YouTube stuff. Check out the Patreon, because I do think that's another funny thing is people are fine giving to a GM like me who's already doing videos about GMing a Patreon donation, but they won't pay for him to GM. Or what if he GMs a game once a month for his patrons? That's something to think about, and maybe comment below and all that. Like I said, please keep it civil if you disagree. I know a lot of people are very passionate about this. I don't want this video to come out antagonistic, but let's keep it civil. Let's keep it clean. And everybody, I'll catch you next week. Bye.